Today we are going to do a problem from Chapter 4, Section 3A, number 8, and it reads as following. Assume A and B are whole numbers, and then we have to answer the following question. So let's start with A. A says if the greatest common divisor equals 1 from A, B, then we need to find the least common multiple, or LCM. So we know that our greatest common divisor equals 1. And the only way it can equal 1 is if we're dealing with prime numbers. Why do we know that? Because prime numbers can only be divided by themselves and 1. Their factors are only 1 and themselves. So let's just get an example up here so that we can visualize it a little bit better. 5 is a prime number because its only factors are 5 and 1. So to get to 5, you can only do 5 times 1 or 1 times 5. So 5 is only divisible by itself as well as 1. Now let's take 7. 7 is another prime number because once again, you can only do 7 times 1 to get to 7 or 1 times 7. So its only two factors are 1 and 7. So we know we're dealing with a prime number because our greatest common divisor is 1. And in these cases, if we wrote out the two sets for 5 and 7, so we're going to just erase these. If we wrote out our two sets for 5 and 7, the only things that they have in common is that 1. So that's how we know that we're dealing with two prime numbers. So now we're going to find our least common multiple, knowing that we have two prime numbers. And our least common multiple in this case is going to be A times B. So if you're dealing with two prime numbers, your least common multiple equals A times B. How do we know that? Let's look at another example. So we're going to use these same two numbers, 5 and 7. And we're just going to write out all the factors that are all the multiples of 5. So we're going to start with 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. We'll stop there for now. 7, we have 7, 14, 21, 28, 35. Hey, we finally came to a common number. And the thing about this is that you'll notice that 7 times 5 also equals 35. In this case, 5 acts as our A, 7 acts as our B. So A times B gives us our least common multiple. So it's the time when these two numbers equal out to be the same when you're adding them together. So that is how you get your least common multiple when you have two prime numbers. You take A times B. Now we're going to move on to B. We're finding our greatest common divisor when our number is A, and our least common multiple is also AA. So in this case, we're going to start out, and I guess I'll just throw out the answer right away. Our greatest common divisor in this case is just A. And how we're going to find that, we'll just throw up another example here. Let's just pick a number for A. So in this case, let's have 8 be our A. So A equals 8. We're going to just make a little set for ourselves here. And the set of factors for 8 is 1, 2, 4, and 8. Now we need another A, and we know that A is 8, so we just write it again. So we're literally writing the same exact set down. And then we look, and our greatest common factor is 8, which is also A. And in this case, every number in the context that we're talking about can be divided by itself. And so the greatest common divisor is just the actual number that you have. Yeah. And that's all we really need to know about that. So we'll move on to the least common multiple. I'm going to erase this to give us a little bit more space. So the least common multiple of AA, when our number is the same, we are going to, once again, just write out those sets. We'll use 8 as another example, so A equals 8. And once again, our least common multiple is actually going to be the same as our greatest common divisor. Our least common multiple is going to be 8, because you can have nothing less than 8, and they both multiply to equal 8. So that is why our least common multiple is equal to A. So it's whatever number you have is your greatest divisor and also your least common multiple. We're going to move on to C for now. So C, we have a greatest common divisor of A squared and A, and the least common multiple of A squared and A. So we're going to start out, our greatest common factor, or common divisor, whatever you want to call it, in this case is going to just be A. And let's pick a number to be A to just give ourselves an example. Let's go with 8 again, since we've been using that for a couple examples. So 8 equals A. Another way to think about this is now A squared, we know, equals A times A. That's another way to write it. So 8 times 8 is going to give us our A squared, and in this case 8 times 8 equals 64. So A squared equals 64. So we're just kind of going to get rid of that. Alright, 64, just keep this on the side. So we have 64 and 8. A squared is 64, 8 is A. Now we're going to find the greatest common divisor. We're going to do that by setting up two sets. So we have 64 and 8. 8, we already know this set pretty well. 64 starts off the same way, and we get a couple more in there. There we go. So those are all the multiples of that number. Now we're looking for the greatest common divisor. The greatest common divisor is A, which in this case happens to be 8. You know that A, or 8 in this case, is a factor of 64 because you used it to get to 64. But you won't have a higher factor because no number higher than 8 is a factor of 8. So because of that, we know that our greatest common factor is A, or in this case, 8. We're going to move on to least common multiple. I'm going to erase our work to give ourselves a little bit more room. So the least common multiple in this situation is just A times A. And how do we know that? Once again, we're just going to use the same example that we did before. So 8 times 8. 8 as our A, and 64 as our A squared. Once again, you know that 8 times 8 equals 64, and the lowest multiple possible with 64, or A squared, is itself, so you can't get any less. So because of that, A times A equals the least common multiple, and in this case, A times A is 64. So our least common multiple for this is 64. We're going to move on to D. If A divides B, find the greatest common multiple, A, B, and the least common multiple of AB. So we're going to start out. Our greatest common multiple, in this case, greatest common divisor, in this case, happens to be A. And let's just take an example to look a little bit further into this. So we're going to take, because A divides B, we know that A is smaller than B, because it has to fit inside of B equally in order to divide B. So we're going to find a number, let's say 3 equals A. Actually, let's pick B first. So B equals 21. Now we have to find a number that divides that to be our A. And let's just go with 3. So 3 divides 21. 7 times, actually. And so we're going to find our greatest common divisor by finding the number that both of these sets have in common. So we're going to write them out. For 21, we have 1, 3, 7, and 21. And for 3, we just have 1 and 3. And so the greatest common divisor of both of these sets is just A itself. And once again, it's kind of the same thing as before. You can't get any higher than 3. 3 is the biggest you have, and you know that it divides 21, so therefore it's your greatest common divisor. We're going to move on to least common multiple now. So least common multiple, once again, I guess we'll just use those same numbers. So our A is 3 and our B is 21. And in this case, your least common multiple is the same number as B, or whatever you have as your B value. In this case, it's 21. 21 is the lowest possible multiple of 3, sorry. No, just kidding. 21 is the lowest possible multiple of 21, or B. So 21, or B, is the lowest possible thing that you can get as a multiple. And then if 3 can be multiplied to get 21, so if A can be multiplied to get B, it's automatically your lowest common multiple. And of course, in this case, it can be multiplied to get 21. 3 can be multiplied to get 21. We know that. 3 times 7 equals 21. 21 divided by 3 equals 7. We know that because we picked a number A, 3, that divides 21. So in this case, we know that our least common multiple is going to be that B value. So in this case, our least common multiple equals 21. And that's all I have for you today. Thanks.